Begin our study with a recognition of thanks and thanksgiving, gratitude for the return of Ron Gvili's body, finally, from Gaza, making him the final of the hostages, bodies of hostages, to be returned. And as sad as that is, for him to come back and finally, as if it's a luxury to have a funeral, still we're filled with gladness that hopefully his family can begin the healing process. Okay, this might be a quick, shorter shiur. I'm not feeling well today, and we're going to finish, though. I'm determined to finish the book or the story of Susanna, and then we'll go on next week to the book of Judith, and we'll probably do just one meeting in the book of Judith, and we still won't catch up to the original plan, but I'm told by Rabbi Marsha that that's all right. We'll figure it out. And I'd like to go back, even though I think we read some of these verses, I'd like to go back to Susanna verses 31. It's in the middle of the second to last page. Okay, Ria, if you'd read verse 31, you have the text?
Yeah. Did you say B?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. Wait a second. The middle. What number?
31.
31. Okay. Now Susanna was a woman of great refinement and beautiful in appearance. As she was veiled, the scoundrels ordered her to be unveiled so that they might feast their eyes on her beauty. Those who were with her and all who saw her were weeping. Then the two
Hold on, hold on,
elders,
hold on.
oh,
The,
sorry.
the parallel text in the Torah that we mentioned last time of Sotah, the woman who's suspected of wrongdoing, of adultery by her husband, her hair is uncovered, her hair is un, unbraided, pizur. It's scattered, her hair, leading us to believe that not necessarily were women veiled at that time in biblical times, but perhaps they just kept their hair up. Here, there's another reading in the alternate version I've mentioned a number of times. There's the version of Theodosius, and there's the version of the Septuagint. And it would be beyond the scope of what we can do to constantly be comparing them.
It's
In
three
the
to
other
six.
version, there is they feast her
It's
eyes.
6:3 to 6:9.
Sorry, we've got somebody else talking.
True.
In the other version, we've got the people feasting on her breasts, like she's really undressed. They humiliate her in public. Um, so now, if you would go ahead and read 34.
Then the two elders stood up before the people and laid their hands on her head. Through her tears, she looked up toward heaven, for her heart trusted in the Lord. The elders said, "While we were walking in the garden alone, this woman came in with two maids, shut the garden doors, and dismissed the maids. Then a young man who was hiding there came to her and was intimate with her. We were in a corner of the garden, and when we saw this wickedness, we ran to them. Although we saw him have intercourse with her, we could not hold the man because he was stronger than we, and he opened the doors and got away. We did, however, seize this woman and ask who the young man was, but she would not tell us. These things we testify. Because they were elders of the people and judges, the assembly believed them and condemned her to death.
Okay, so
Mm.
pretty quick trial, huh?
Uh,
No cross examination, but we'll see that'll come up. Any ideas about the first sentence that they lay their hands on her head? Does that sound familiar from anybody?
Wait a second.
Isn't it how smicha is rabbinic authority is transferred with the laying of the hands on the head?
Right, of course, much later, and that would be after this, and that would be in a positive sense as opposed to this in a negative sense. Can you think of anything beforehand in the Torah? It's rather obscure. It's the case of a man who is blasphemy, the blasphemer, blasphemer, the guy who says blasphemy. The judges put their hands on his head. The difference here, of course, is a farce, a bit of a farce, because they're the accusers. They can't be the judges as well. It's not according to the Torah, but it pretends to be according to the Torah by taking different pieces here and there, like they put their hands. Another place where we have hands on the head? Anybody? Sacrifices.
Um, oh,
Yes.
sorry. This is also much later, but that's what I think of. But on Friday night, when one blesses when children, isn't it? At least it's an Ashkenazi custom to put the hands on the head of the child.
Yeah, it's pretty general. I think it's pretty universal in the world to put hands on a child, bestowing a blessing. That's in the positive sense, hence the ordination, hence the blessing, hence by extension the priests that put their hands out like this, they don't touch everybody, but they're making a motion to everybody. But here it's on the negative side. Or the two issues. One, either because it's as if she's being categorized as a blasphemer with this little detail, or because she's a sacrifice. She's a victim. She's a sacrifice of, might we say, the patriarchy, perhaps, and what men do when they lust. And they're going to get away. They're not going to get, if they can't get away with what they want to do, they'll be damned if they're going to let her be happy in her life. Yeah. Any other comments or questions on this issue or this section? Okay. Cantor, would you like to read 42?
I don't have the sheet.
Oh, okay. Then Megan?
Sure. 42. Then Susanna cried out with a loud voice and said, "O eternal God, you know what is secret and are aware of all things before they came." Just a second. "O eternal God, you know what is secret and are aware of all things before they come to be. You know these men have given false evidence against me, and now I am to die, though I have done none of the wicked things that they have charged against me."
Okay, so God comes into the picture here. She's not relying on human beings. She cries out to God. A little bit reminiscent of Esther cries out to God in the additions, in the Septuagint additions to the Masoretic text. Yes, Ria.
I wanted to ask in Torah, and I don't remember where, it talks about the need, capital punishment needs how many witnesses in order to for this to go forward? Two. Oh, these are two men. But
Exactly.
oh dear. Oh, okay.
There's an
I
additional. So you bring up the laws of the Torah. There's an additional law in the Torah, well, in Deuteronomy, and that's called Edim Zolumin. The whole section of the Talmud about this as well. Intentionally nasty witnesses. Zomem means to intentionally do something wrong. So I'll call them intentionally nasty witnesses. What they try to do, Edim Zolumin, is they try to frame somebody for something very serious. Let's say in this case, it's to kill that person. And what happens to them when they're discovered? The same punishment. So if you attempt to frame somebody for something, that's not. I don't think that's the case in American law at all. But in Torah law, if you attempt to frame something for X, for one particular thing, and the punishment is Y, and you do not succeed in framing them because you're called out and you're proven wrong, then you, the witnesses who tried to frame, you get the punishment, even if it's death, even if it's death. So that's kind of in the background here. So a few things in the background. The author wants us to think of the biblical process going on of a Beit Din, but we know that it's corrupt because these two guys, they're the ones who are calling the shots. That's corruption at its worst, okay? That putting of the hands makes it sound like it's official, as if she's a blasphemer, as if she's a sacrifice. I think that's how I read it. She prays because she knows that in this man's world she doesn't have a chance. She she needs help. She definitely needs help. She prays in places where other biblical characters have not prayed, yet often those prayers have been injected in later versions of the same story. For instance, sometimes in the Targum, in the Aramaic Targum, that is the more expansive Targumim, you find characters in Genesis who pray. Rachel, Rivka, and the prayer's not in the Torah itself. Yes, Megan.
Um, I just couldn't help thinking in the 34 before what I read, and even during this one, when they laid their hands on her head, and then they said they were in the garden and they saw her having intercourse. I thought, you guys, get your hands off of her. And what were you doing watching her? It was just so
Scuzzy?
it was yes. And
Creepy?
icky. And
Icky.
it was such a setup. So that's
And so it's meant to be almost even, not humorous would not be the right word, but
yeah,
with
it
a
was
certain,
gross.
yeah, with a certain amount of, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so she's prayed. Why don't you read another section? Whoever was reading, Megan, was that you? Or whoever? 44?
Me again?
Sure, yeah.
The Lord heard her cry. Just as she was being led off to execution, the Lord stirred up the Holy Spirit of a young man named Daniel, and he shouted with a loud voice, I want no part in shedding this woman's blood.
Oh, okay.
Daniel.
The prayers were heard by God. Just one more before we get to it. One more story that comes up here, and I don't know if you did it with Rabbi Singer or not, or if, I don't know if we've done it before. The story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Tamar
We did
is
do it, but I don't know if we did it with Rabbi Singer, but we did study it at some point.
okay. So Tamar is being led to her death because she's been accused of adultery. She's not married, but she's a Yabemit. She still is under the law of Yibum, except for Judah won't give her his third son. So she's in a predicament. She can't move. She's what we would call today an aguna. She's chained. And of course she tricks her father-in-law into sleeping with her at the height of the party time, when they cut the wool, shear the wool. She dresses up and he's drunk, and she takes some of his most prized possessions because he doesn't have any money to give to her. And if, as she's being led to the stake to be burnt, she says, "Whoever are these is the father of this child," and everybody recognized him as Judah, as Judah did as well. And Judah says, "He tzadkami many." She's more correct than I am. One of the medieval rabbinic interpretations, I think it was Rashbam, either Rashbam or Radak, said, Tzadkami many, well, she's right, but I'm also right. She's just more right. It's that kind of barely, not really explaining. No, you were wrong. You were totally wrong. The whole story is wrong about you, Judah. And yet she gets through it. But the idea that she's being led to her fate, very much taken from that as well. The story at every turn, if we did this slower, this particular story, we would find even more associations in biblical narrative and biblical law. So this is a late kind of a process, a late treatment of biblical literature in order to hammer out some of the things or lift up some of the things that are still out there in society, and that cruel sexism is out there, and that lasciviousness, whatever the word is. Guys, I'm having a hard time today, so whenever you think that I'm about to say a word, go ahead and complete it for me. All right, so we got her being led off to execution, and suddenly Daniel comes. Now, we haven't heard of Daniel before this, because this comes, the way this was designed, this piece comes in the beginning of the book of Daniel. And so in many ways, It's Superman, here to save the day kind of a thing. He's really the hero of the moment. Dan, would you like to read a little bit for us? 47.
Okay, I don't have the text you downloaded. I have an earlier copy from the Daniel course, so the translation doesn't quite match.
You go ahead. I think we'll be all right.
Okay, and starting with 47.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, 47 and 44, which
47. All the people turned.
okay. Then all the people turned to him and asked, "What do you mean by that?" Having taken his stand in their midst, he replied, "Are you such fools, sons of Israel? Would you condemn a daughter of Israel without first cross-examining and discovering its accuracy? Go back to the place of trial. These men have framed her." So all the people hurried back, and then the presiding elders said to him, "Come sit with us and inform us, since God has granted authority to you." Then Daniel said to them, "Separate them some distance from one another, and I will interrogate them." When they had been separated from one another, he summoned one of them and said to him, You who have grown old in wickedness, the sins which you committed in the past have now caught up with you, making unjust decisions, condemning the innocent and acquitting the guilty, though the Lord has said, "You shall not put to death the innocent and righteous person." Now then, if you really did see this woman, tell us, under what tree did you see them making love? He answered, under a clove, Shinon tree. Very good, retorted Daniel. You've perjured yourself. Already an angel of God has received the sentence from God and will cleave, she say, you in half. Then he set him aside and ordered them to bring in the other one. You descendant of Canaan, not Judah, said Daniel to him. Beauty has seduced you and lust has corrupted your heart. Now then tell me, under which tree did you catch them making love? Under you, Krinos, he answered them. Very good, retorted Daniel to him. You too have perjured yourself. The angel of God is waiting with drawn sword to you, precise you in half, and destroy the pair of you. Okay. Then all the congregation cheered, and they blessed God who saved.
Hold on, Dan. Let's hold on. So a dramatic and almost humorous cross-examination of the witnesses. First of all, put them in different rooms. We all know that from TV, right? You always got to put them in different rooms. You got to separate them. And then to ask them in a very, very clever way, under what tree? Now, comes the tree, whether it's a clove tree and an oak tree or a mustic tree or other kinds of translations we have here, this is one of the interesting matters when it comes to Shoshana. Because there's a play on words in the Greek, doesn't matter now what the words are in the Greek, but there's a play on words, which the name of the tree, and then that's going to happen to you. There were those, I think it was Origen, the church father, if I remember correctly, who said, then it has to have been written in Greek. Because if it has a play on words in Greek, it's how could it be translated from the Aramaic? And believe me, I spent hours and hours looking for different trees this could be in a Semitic language, and I came up with some, and I just can't find. It's a paper I wrote, in graduate school. Who knows? But I can't find it anywhere. But suffice it to say that this has become one of the issues as to whether the book was originally in a Semitic language and translated into Greek, or whether it was in Greek to begin with, and therefore you have these play on words. Yes, James.
Yeah, with all of a sudden Daniel appearing out of nowhere, this young man who stands up to these elders. It reminds me a little bit of David and Goliath, where they have to choose one soldier to do battle with Goliath, and no one wants to do it except for this little kid that comes, that stands up and runs out in front of Goliath.
Right. Well, you certainly do have the underdog, the unknown, the underdog outsmarting these men of fame, these men of stature. Yeah, absolutely. They didn't have to, he came forward in this, right? He shows if we look at it strictly, look at it carefully, he shows leadership skills. He wasn't asked, nobody says, isn't there anybody here who could defend her properly? That's not the story. The story is he appears In that way, more like Superman, I would say. Malka, did you want to say something?
Yes, what happens to the two false witnesses reminds me of the principle Midah Keneged Midah.
Yeah, or Adim Zolamim, they will be put to death. I mean, I forgot if it says it. But whatever it is, yeah, I don't know if it goes. But that would have been their fate. Their fate would have been they tried to put her to death. Now they're put to death, and that's what Daniel does, or the narrator does in a clever way, also in a lighthearted way. It's not about revenge as much as we would like it to be, perhaps revenge on these two women. It's saving the purity of Shoshana, saving the justice. It's not about getting revenge, I feel, and that taking it, lifting it from the realm of revenge, is perhaps done by this humorous wordplay. You know, what tree were you under? You were under a clove tree. Oh, really? The angel of God's going to come and clove your head. What were you under? You were an oak tree. Oak tree is Allah in alone, and Allah or Allah is a mastic tree, is a gum tree, like a same family as the pistachio. Then an angel of God will curse your head. There's a lot of different possibilities what it could have been in its original language, and it's been changed for English translations as well. Clove tree and clove. That's an English translation. That's not what the Greek says. So what really happens we don't know, but what should have happened to them according to the laws, they should have been killed. Dan, you want to continue?
And all the congregation cheered, and they blessed God who saves those who trust in him. Then they turned on the two elders, for Daniel had convicted them of perjury through their own testimony. So they punished the elders the way the elders had intended to afflict their neighbor. Acting in accordance with the law of Moses, they put them to death. So an innocent life was saved that day. Hilkiah and his wife praised God for their daughter Susanna, as did her husband Joachim and all the relatives, because she was found innocent of any impropriety. From that day forward, Daniel had a great reputation in the eyes of the people.
So once again, something I brought up last time or the time before. The story from our point of view is about Shoshana, unjustly accused of doing something at the hands of lustful, evil men of power, stuck in a man's system. Really, where could she possibly go? And that's the story for us, and she prays. But of course, the framework of the story, from a wider Jewish point of view, is it's about Daniel. It's not so much about Shoshana. It's about Daniel came and saved the day. Now, I guess we could have it both ways, right? It could be about both of them, but just to remind you that the beginning of the story spoke of a man, and the end of the story spoke of a man. That's kind of the official way it needs to be in the stories of ancient Israel, even though the story might be about a woman. Comments, questions? Nothing. Okay. This is odd with this group.
Well, I really like the way you framed it at the beginning, what you talked about, how it's about, it starts with the man and ends with the man. And that really kind of gives a different I don't think I would have seen that before, that it wasn't really about Shoshana, but it's about Daniel. But isn't that like each generation has to interpret the Torah at its time? Maybe 100 years, right now we do there's a large focus on women in the Torah, where maybe 200 years ago, it would be more on Daniel, and Shoshana would just be like a subtext to it.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Everybody uses it differently, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a version of this story from the last few decades of women, Jewish feminists, that don't emphasize the Daniel part of the story at all. Yeah, I would say so. And perhaps it never was really a Daniel story. Maybe once upon a time it was really only about Shoshana. Maybe she got out of it herself. Yeah, Sylvia.
I think that's a very good point because it kind of reminds me of something that Judith Plasko says in that there is so much evidence about how women are marginalized and yeah, marginalized, I guess is the word, and that there is evidence. Yeah, no, I'm not a scholar, but this is what I'm reading. Um, that there were editors and redactors who couldn't deny that there were important women in the Bible, but they minimized their importance and their functions. Um, so I think that James made a very good point.
Okay. All right. Anybody surprised? I mean, is this people? Did everybody know this tale before we looked at it in the last 2 weeks? Right. So, one question I guess I want to ask or want to put out there is now that now that we do have access to this material as Jewish material already from the end of the 19th century, why is it not incorporated more into Jewish curriculum for kids, especially for girls? That's one of my questions.
Um, be, don't you think some of it is that it's one not in the canon, and the implication of that it's not as well known?
Well, that's what but it has been around Jewish studies. That's my whole point. It's not as well known to people in the street, but scholars have known about this for a long time.
Well,
Educators should know about this.
but speaking as someone who taught supplemental religious school for years in the conservative movement, this would be for adolescents. There's no time in the curriculum is so crammed. I mean, it would have to be an unusual school that would let an individual teacher add to the curriculum. So then the question becomes who's writing curricula for adolescents.
Okay, that's is kind of my question. Yeah.
Whoops.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
Well, and also to remember as the scripture was being canonized, this was the rabbis who were doing that, the great sages. So we're dealing with a patriarchal society who's reading um, our basic text and saying what's important is what and what is not important. You know, the women didn't have any say over that. So that and when I mean Table's point, when we're doing studies and adult studies, we're doing a lot of Torah studies and it's not there. It's up to us to kind of bring them out. And I don't think that, I mean, I think um, it's been a little while since we started doing that, but uh, it's not a long-term commitment we've had to uh, taking those little pieces of what is not canonized or what is looks like it's um, not so important and looking at them. Um, I mean, you look at the Song of the Sea. Was it Moses who wrote it, or was it Miriam who wrote it? And it's only been a few years since we thought that maybe Miriam actually wrote it. Right? Maybe not.
Well, I also taught Hebrew school and confirmation for years and years and years. And I actually remember teaching something like this, the story of Daniel, but they kind of excluded, you know. I remember they talk about it was a book that dealt with all the writings afterwards. And one of the things is Daniel comes at the very, very end. So even if you have a curriculum, unless you start with Daniel, most likely it will end. And I remember it was a story about a woman they really desexed it, that she was, she was blamed for being, in a garden with the man, and or and they talked about the trial. But you start talking about youngsters and teenagers. I don't know if they have the life experience to really appreciate this story or fully comprehend it. They're just trying to deal with puberty themselves. I think I think sometimes when we talk about Torah, it's hard enough to get them to come to bar mitzvah confirmation after bar and bat mitzvah, you know, and to have a story like this, I think they would be interested in a story like this, but it really has to be presented in a well-organized fashion. And probably will have to be presented in a whole curriculum that specifically looks at these issues. And then again, you have parents. Parents may not want you to be teaching this also, even though it deals with the Bible. So you have that. You have that issue also too.
Why don't we give Cantor a boss to say something? Go ahead. Cantor,
Well, yeah, I got it. I think that we don't teach about sex or anything about sex to kids, that's totally excised from the curriculum all the way through. So this would be, forget it, it's way too much for them. I don't know if it's really too much for them, but in our thinking, it's too much for them.
Priya, and then Eileen.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the text and leave the religious school. So in Daniel, or in this reading, that Daniel's the hero and not God. So the book of Maccabees was also not part of our canon, where the Maccabees are the heroes. And so I would assume that this may be the main reason, because God, and in Exodus, Moses is the leader, but God is the way to freedom and the way to the promised land. So in the Greek plays, they always had ex machina. I think that's what it was called. That something would come down, they're on the stage and save the day. And so in Daniel is the ex machina.
Yeah. Okay, and Eileen.
Well, I'm just going back to the teaching. This is a messy story, and for adolescent girls, especially, well, I would say in an Orthodox school, it would be an Orthodox woman teaching this story to young adolescent teenage girls, and I think it's messy on both parts. And I don't know that a teacher would feel comfortable addressing the girls, and the girls would feel comfortable hearing this from a teacher and not from a parent. I just can't see it being taught
Well,
at all.
it's interesting for me to see the volume of opposition to the idea. It's first of all to answer the fact that it's not in the canon. Judah and Tamar, chapter 38 of Genesis, are in the canon. The Parshat Sotah is in the canon. This horrible ordeal of suspicion of a woman who's been adultery, and it's not reciprocal. The story of Ruvain, who sleeps with his mother's handmaid.
And Ammon and Tamar.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about God being the mover, the saver,
No.
the leader.
I was responding to everybody here. God,
Yeah.
in some of the stories, God is more in the background, and some of the stories is just about human beings. And in the Sota story, God is in the foreground because God is the one who controls the ordeal. That's not a story; that's a law. I differ with most of you. But I lived in a different area. I lived in Israel, and perhaps because I was the rabbi and not a teacher in a school, I was the one who could decide. These are things that I taught kids in their early teen years. They're part of our tradition, and
How
it's
did you
important
frame the story for them then?
as what they saw, an absolute injustice. What what do you? I don't understand. How would I frame the story of Shoshana the way that it's framed in the book
I
itself?
mean, how like the story of Tamar and Aman, how did you frame those types
So
of, or
Tamar,
Dina, how did you
yeah.
frame those stories?
So Tamar and Amnon is a difficult one because it's
Hmm.
rape. It's rape inside of the house.
Yeah.
Didn't do that as much, but I did do Tamar and Yehuda and Tamar because it's like kind of once removed from people's experience. And the rape of Dinah, absolutely. The fact that she was blamed in rabbinic literature for bringing it upon herself. Those are things that kids were blamed already in Israel in the 90s when I was a rabbi of a congregation that had young people in it. Those were things that were talked about if we let them talk about it. So I'm not here to admonish others. I'm here to bring it up as to what I've seen over it's still and that's as far as kids are concerned. To me, it's still a little surprising after so many years of feminist scholarship, Jewish feminist scholarship, that adults haven't heard more about these particular stories.
I think Phyllis Tribble has a book. She's a Christian feminist called Texts of Terror.
Right?
And I think that these stories aren't told to young girls because they're texts of terror.
Yeah.
And if I heard this and I was 8, 9, 10, I would be terrified.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree, 8, 9, 10. But if you heard them when you were 16 and 17, perhaps less so. Or if you heard them when you were in college as part of a literature class
That would be
and, and,
different.
and understanding, I think, yes, of course, I don't, yeah, I'm not suggesting they go to the youngest kids.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is most Jews don't know this story. And to me, that's a little
Mm.
bit strange. Yeah.
Well, Rabbi, actually, when you look at the story, there's not really any sex in it per se. I mean, there's no sexual activity. It's just all these references to lust and, the body and all their desire for her. But there's actually, it's not like she slept with them. Uh, it's more of the it's more of the setup than the actual sex.
Sylvia?
Rabbi?
I think that what I feel is that in this talk is that what we're dealing with is our perceptions of what young people can handle. Because, and I'll give you a story that has nothing to do with young people, it has to do with older people. So I live in an assisted living facility, and I did a teaching that had to do with dealing with death and God and all of that. And I was told that we shouldn't teach those kind of things in assisted living community rooms because we're afraid of death and we don't want to hear it and we don't want to know it and we look at it all, I mean, all around us. But that was their favorite teaching actually because they wanted to talk about it. There are things they want to talk about, and I believe that there are things that teenagers want to know about and talk about. And if we protect them too much, we don't give them that that right and that perspective and that ability to get help with those kinds of questions.
Thank you. Taibo?
I was thinking about Maka's point about terror. And I don't know this is terror, but this is shame. And maybe comparing to Israelis in the 1990s. But in America, girls' psychological difficulties around body image are epidemic and getting worse. And the notion of how she was paraded, I think that could also be problematic. I mean, you know how careful American society is about triggers and triggering?
Yeah.
I mean, that could be something for girls who are suffering with anorexia or bulimia and the notion of shame in their naked body. Maybe that's why, too, that it opens up more than what one would think the focus would be.
Okay. Megan?
from my work, I think it's really necessary to teach starting at an appropriate age in the adolescent years, because this still goes on. I mean, if a woman's raped, she has to prove that she still today, that she was really raped, and before this poor man gets put away or this or that. And so she's sort of paraded around naked if she goes to court with it. A lot of people drop the case because they don't want to be in that. And then with my work, they come to see me 30 years later, still traumatized by the whole thing. So teaching young people that as a woman and as young men, teaching them respect for women and girls and this and that. I think it's necessary to teach this to young people. And I don't think it scares them as much as it scares them when they run across it and they don't know anything about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that it differs in each case, in every person
Yeah.
where folks are at. It
Yeah.
depends on how much power you have over the curriculum. I think a woman's study course in a university is very different than a high school for 15-year-olds or whatever it might be, youth movement. I think that rabbis have the liberty and the power in many cases to do things that perhaps teachers are not able to do or are not as confident in doing, because there's that, at least that aura of authority, whether it's real or justified or not. But this would be my message to young rabbis would be to utilize the kinds of things that we have in our tradition for to talk about things in a Jewish way. Not, God forbid, not authoritatively. It's never for me, not all of you study with me for a long time, but for me, the text, the biblical text, whether it's this Bible, the Greek Bible of the Alexandria community, or the Bible that we consider Tanakh, biblical text is not authoritative for me as much as it's inspirational. I'm looking to have a conversation based on this Jewish literature. And if I can bring these things into a conversation the same way that I bring in a Talmudic tale or Song of Songs in Itziradika or whatever it may be, there's a time and a place for everything, but you got to know about it to know that it's in your toolkit. Yeah. Ria.
So while we're on this topic, we have a perfect example in Epstein, child and child trafficking, which is and the only thing to counter it with very young children is to let them know that out there's some pretty awful things, and give them some kind of a sense of pride in themselves. And so we're living in a emotionally and physical dangerous period, and better armed than go innocently into the future. You're never too young to know.
Okay. Um, Madalena, could you put the text that I sent you in the chat box, please?
Yes.
Um, I'm happy to continue to talk a little bit more about this, but I did want to give a preview of next week. Judith is a longer book, and it's a little bit hard to get through. So I'm proposing that we don't read through all of Judith, unlike what I usually do, and instead you take a look at this. Let me put this up here. Uh, this outline provided to us by, of all places, the Wikipedia article. Should know there's a lot of good that comes. Sorry, we've got some. If you could mute yourself if you're not.
Did you make a mess?
Okay. Wonder if somebody has a dog. Okay. So if folks could take a look at this, if you want to read all through Judith before next week, b'vakasha, please. But this will just give you the kind of the background, the outline, and then we'll go to different verses. My point next week will be to show how Judith is the anti-Esther. Just like there's the Antichrist, there's the anti-Esther. And this is a different version of the anti-Esther, or the alternate Esther. Maybe I shouldn't say anti, but the alternate Esther, a different one than the one that we met in the Septuagint's additions to the book of Esther. Nonetheless, another example of the kind of woman we want our young women, I'm being facetious here, but we Jewish male educators in the 2nd century, 3rd century BC, these are the women we want to, we want to give them role models. And in the same way, I would say, and this is fine, this is kind of my final comment on Susanna. Susanna's a role model. She's a role model to young women who is willing to stand up to the nonsense, is willing to take the help of another man who she intuits can help her in this case. She's a role model of someone who turns to God when lack of justice is about to ruin her life. And so that I think that's kind of my overall purpose in this mini course on women from the outside. Anything else, folks? I apologize, I'm just not feeling
I
it.
was about to say, just wishing you a refuah shlema. And if my hands were up to it, I have a virtual background that says refuah shlema, but I can't quite get there in time.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you. It's understood and taken nonetheless. All right. Anything else before we end today?
Absolutely. It looks like maybe we could, if you want, we could end this a little early. You're starting to look a little tired from sitting up for too long. So
Oh no, that is my point exactly, Sylvia. I'm ending this. Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
yes,
Okay.
refuah shlema.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Be well. Thank you, Madam.